Our agenda today has 3 items: the Redevelopment Agency 2010 interim financials, the fiscal year 2010 interim financials for the city, and the August 2009 investment report. So, Mr. Samario, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Bob Samario, interim finance director, and as you indicated, we are here to cover 3 items. The first 2 items are interim financial statements, one for the RDA for July 31st, 2009, and the second is for the city, same period. And as you know, we don't really have a prepared report. We are here to answer questions you might have on those 2 items. We can start with item 1. Mr. Brian Bossi is here to answer any questions you might have about some of the information on that schedule, that report.
You do.
And then, of course, Rudy Livingston is here as well to answer other questions you might have.
We do have a question. Ms. Snyder.
Thank you. This is the first, I'm looking at the RDA piece, page 3. This is the first month of a new fiscal year, I guess page 3 and page 5, where there are a couple of items where it says finished. And I kind of remember last fiscal year we were talking about taking finished things off in the new fiscal year so we can know where the funding is. And so can you comment on that? I'm sure we're waiting for the audited results, and right? Is that no, can you comment on that?
What we're basically doing with the projects that are considered finished, some of these have been were requested to be closed as part of the fiscal year 2010 budget. Others have been left open because there are still a few bills coming through on the various projects. So we just want to make sure that everything's paid for and cleared up before we do close those down, remove the funds, and clean the project off of these lists.
So by being finished, the project construction's finished, but the accounts are not closed. Is that
That's correct, because
the way to look at
sometimes
it?
smaller items do pop up. For instance, East Cabrillo sidewalks items such as some of the plantings needed to be replaced because they were faulty. They didn't work with the water systems that were set up, the recycled water systems. So we wait to make sure that all those are cleaned up before we do close it out, because we realize that the agencies or departments responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of those at this particular time don't have the funds to make that happen. So we're just trying to make sure we do everything correctly and get it as done as we possibly can before we turn it on over.
Okay, so in relation to the item coming up later today with the full council, when we're looking at the RDA capital budget and the funding available, the dollars here, like if you look at page 3 under the Coffee Cat pedestrian improvements, it looks like $17,300, and then on page 5, those 3 items there, $73,000, $2,000, and $19,000. Those numbers are not on, or they are? I mean, when you were doing your, I guess my point being is that if this money, if the projects are finished, and there might be some minor pieces of bills that still need to be paid, but the majority of this is still available for future projects, and we're prioritizing what we can do this year and next year. How do we weigh those options in terms of what's available?
Sure, that's a great question. Again, these are based on July 31st. So since that time, if you recall, the state budget passed in the latter half of July. So once we had those figures set and what our ERAF obligation was, then we went back to this, and it's been cleaned up to the point where these projects that have been closed out, that funding is then put into the proverbial pot, if you will,
Okay.
to
Since we're
be
in
discussed
the
later
end
today.
of September, and this is showing as of July 31st. So
That's correct.
in the meantime, that happened.
So all these have been accounted for.
Okay. All right. That was my only question.
Okay,
Thank you.
Ms. Falcone, is there a motion on that?
Sure, I'll move accepting the RDA fiscal year 2010 interim financial statements.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, Bob, over to you and Rudy.
Okay, so we'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have on item 2, and Rudy Livingston, accounting manager, is here
Okay,
to answer those.
Rudy, I have marked several things.
Sure.
Let's see, I don't know whether I should just read them off and...
Well, if you let us know the page number, and then we
Okay,
can
well, we'll
go.
just start going through it, and we'll see where we wind up. Page 2, self-insurance trust fund.
Yes.
Just noted the expenditures were running at 44.5.
Yeah, and the reason for that is that when we pay the actual premiums for the year, we reverse that and put it into a prepaid insurance account. That prepaid insurance adjustment had not been done by the time, by July 31st when we close these out. And so then we take that amount, we amortize it over the 12 months of the fiscal year.
Okay. You
So-
anticipated
and-
me on that one, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Page 3, VLF. I guess that's good. I don't know what it is, actually. 36%. Is this a revenue that comes in? Page 3.
Right, the vehicle license fees and intergovernmental. The interesting thing about the VLF is, yeah, it's erratic in the way it comes. It doesn't come pro rata throughout the year. And so some months we'll have a big spike and some months are going to be really low. And so we really need several months of history to be able to make
Yeah.
any kind of
I was
projections about the
wondering if
year.
this might have anything to do with the cash for clunkers thing. Would that have hit in July report?
It probably not, because towards the latter part of July and into August, and so those numbers will probably not be reflected until a little bit later on. We don't get those things immediately from the state.
Ms. Falcone?
Just on that, my memory isn't serving me particularly well, so just tell me whether or not the state, when they borrowed money a couple of years ago, 18 months ago or whatever it is, from the VLF, have they trued up with us yet? They have.
Maybe we should have Jill Tarr, our treasurer man, or Bob Samario.
If you could
Yes,
just,
of course. Yeah,
in a
they-
nutshell, tell me that they've paid us or they haven't and why not.
They repaid us when they were supposed to. That was a couple years ago. So, yeah, there's no money outstanding on that loan.
And on that loan, and they haven't borrowed since then, although there was a conversation with this year's budget that it might come up again.
Actually, with this year's budget, state's budget, they have essentially implemented the trigger that they will be borrowing 8% of property taxes statewide. For us, it's
No, but that's
2.2
through
million.
1A.
That's through Prop 1A.
That's through Prop 1A.
Right.
That's not
But that'll
necessarily
be the current year
VLF.
that they'll take those monies, though.
Yes. Okay, thanks.
Okay. I have several more.
Okay?
Just noticing on page 4, city clerk at 29%. Does that have to do with the election preparation?
It certainly does. Yes.
Okay. Just got that. On page 5, the wildland fire, is that the preparedness issue that went on during the summer, or?
Well, that actually encompasses a few things. They have had some contracts out for brush clearing and things, which is the preparedness area, and some of that was carried over at the year end, and they also had some new contracts out there. They're being very vigilant in trying to make sure things are being taken care of the way that they should be in preparation, trying to avoid these fire issues.
Just to be clear, is most of that covered through the assessment?
That is correct.
Okay, so it's not general fund money. It's through the self-imposed tax that the property owners they levied upon themselves through the assessment in order to accomplish the mitigation in the high fire land
That's correct.
areas. Thank
Except
you.
this happens to be general fund here.
This we have the wildland
Well-
mitigation fire fund, and then we also have the general fund portion
Yeah.
of fire, where they have a division that's set up for the wildland fire mitigation also.
But most of that work that's being done in the hills is through the assessment funds.
A significant portion of it, yes, but there's some general fund money that's also
There is some,
going in there.
yeah, through the fire department. Yes.
All righty. Rudy, page 7, community promotions at 22.9. Do you know why that's running?
Yeah, the biggest reason for that is the money that we're paying to the community, the CVB. All of a sudden, I draw a blank. The Conference Visitors Bureau. All of a sudden, I drew a blank. I can't remember my kid's name sometimes. But that is the largest portion of that, and that contract. We don't take that out pro rata 1/12 every single month.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Now we're moving out of the general fund. Page 9, water operating fund, the materials and supplies, that's pretty heavy. Did they?
Yeah, actually, the reason why the materials and supplies and services are pretty high is because of the encumbrance, and
Yeah, 3.6.
that relates to a lot of the chemicals and things that they have to purchase, or the contracts that the POs that they issue at the beginning of the year to cover their expenditures. And we also want to remind you that, as you well know, that because of the fires, they've had a lot more treatment costs in there, so that their costs for the actual filters and things of that sort have been significantly higher recently.
Yeah, so we would expect that to
Yes.
be. Yeah, so
And that's why in the first month of the year, we typically have some really kind of funny variances because of the encumbrances that come forward.
okay, thanks. Switching over to page 11, downtown parking. What does anybody know what the 521-391 is? That's the encumbrance.
The encumbrance in the special projects?
Yeah.
Yes, that's primarily transit programs. We have $280,000 that's actually set aside for transit activities. We've got $171,000 for the MyRide, the employee bus pass program, and also shuttle bus programs.
Okay.
So it's a transportation related.
Okay, good enough. Over on 13, under the golf course fund, that just noticed again the special project. That's an encumbrance that pumps that up, and I gather that the materials and supplies, it's 28.3, is an encumbrance as well. Is that their redo of something out there?
Well, when we're looking at that line, the material supplies and services, once again, they have a lot of open POs and contracts that they set for landscaping, supplies, services, and various things. If you look down a little bit below the $485,000, that's where we put the safety plan, the safety improvement program out at the airport.
Okay.
There. I mean, yeah, the golf course, excuse me.
Yeah. Page 17, the ICS. Several things are significantly out of whack there. Starting with materials, special projects.
Yeah, once again, there are several blanket purchase orders that are actually open for various things, such as cabling or purchases of various supplies and things that'll occur throughout the year. And it's that encumbrance number that's really running that number up.
Yeah.
And I imagine you're going to ask about the $175,000 in the equipment line
Yes, I was.
also. And that has to do with the infrastructure upgrade that they're currently doing with some servers and things. We carried over some money for that, and there's some contracts that are outstanding on that. So that's what that relates to.
Okay,
there.
great. Thanks. Okay, last one on this report, page 18. In the waterfront, I found that the slip transfer was high, and that seemed odd because I heard it was low. And then down further, rents and concessions
Yeah.
high. It's also surprised me because I thought it would be low.
It's interesting that you asked about those two because I also had that same observation. Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer at this time. I lost my original that had some notes and things, and I have to talk with the folks down at the waterfront. But I did look, and actually we had several transaction and slip transfer fees in July. And it appears that that's a good number, but I have to talk to the folks at the waterfront and see what's happening.
Yeah, if you could
with
just
that.
check that out and get back to me offline,
I will.
that's fine. The reason I made it a note was there was an email that came through about not increasing fees and that there was slips going for lack of demand and things like that. And then all of a sudden, it's high. So
Well, they also lowered their revenue estimate for this year, too.
Yeah.
And if it had been at the levels where we were at in the prior years, there wouldn't be such a significant variance in here. It would be
Great.
a much smaller. But the rents and concessions, I'm going to be looking at that one because there was an accounts receivable billing for $121,000 that was done, and I'm not sure exactly what that encompasses.
Okay.
They do have percentage rents down at a lot of the facilities down there. It's possible that they just had some, a lot of activity in the month of July.
all right, is there a motion?
I'll move. Well, I have a quick question
Go
first.
ahead.
Can I do that? Just,
don't
I
wanna
think it's just
preempt
to
you.
follow up on a number of things you've said all along, just so in case on page 1, if people just look at each item and look at the bottom line, it looks like the expenditures are large, especially in the non-general fund funds. And as you've been saying, it's due to the upfront purchase orders at the beginning of the year that sort of puts that out of whack. And I just wanted to say that again out loud because sometimes people look at this saying, how in the world could we be 8.3% in the fiscal year and the golf course be 26.3% expenses paid already? So
That's a correct observation. One thing I would point out, though, you'll notice that the general fund is only at 9%, including the encumbrances. And one of the reasons for that is that we did not carry over a lot of the outstanding items. We went through and analyzed basically every single contract that was outstanding at year end, and we carried over the ones that were crucial and important, and several of them were closed. And so we have really made a conscientious effort on the general fund to rein things in.
great. Well, thank you for explaining
Thanks.
that. And then with that, I'll move this to the consent calendar.
For a second?
And I'll second, but I have a quick
Go ahead,
comment
please.
back to the waterfront. And to some respect, looking at the numbers on their faces is almost misleading in that when something like a slip transfer fee is down, actually the fact that the revenues haven't come in becomes more of a percentage of the budget, and kind of in a way it's counterintuitive, if you will. And so you have to look at it upside down almost. Down is bad, which drives other numbers up, and up is good, which drives other numbers down. So that being said, if anybody out there understood what I said, good for you.
That's a good explanation.
And I've seconded the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. On to the investment report. I think that's Jill.
Good afternoon, Chair Horton and committee members. I'm Jill Tara, Treasury Manager, and I'm here to present the August 2009 investment report as a non-quarter end report. I'll walk you through the activity through the month and answer any questions you might have at the end. Turning to page 1 of the attachment, it shows the activity and interest for the month of August. As you can see on the upper left-hand side, that shows the investment activity consisting of purchases and deposits for the period. We had $9 million in LAIF deposits sent up to the state money market account. We also purchased 2 callable maturities during the period, a $2 million Fannie Mae and a $2 million Freddie Mac, both callable as LAIF alternatives during the period, for a total purchase or deposit activity of $13 million during the month. The sales, maturities, calls, and withdrawals for the period, I'll note that there were no calls and no sales during the month of August. We had 2 maturities, Federal Farm Credit Bank and an FHLB, both matured during the month of August. We had LAIF withdrawals for the city account of $12.5 million and a $1 million LAIF withdrawal from the RDA account. Onto the right-hand side of the schedule, it shows the interest revenue during the period. The interest income earned on the pooled investments of the city's portfolio totaled $385,004 during the period. You'll notice that our sweep account interest was $165 for the month, and I wanted to point out that the interest rates continue to be very low. The interest we're earning on the bank account is 0.18%, so still record lows. We probably won't see that number come up for some time. The RDA investments earned on the money held up at LAIF earned $18,908 during the period, and the total interest on the whole portfolio during the month of August was $403,912. On to page 2 of the attachment. The section at the top is a recap of the balance at the end of the previous month as of July 31st. You can see that the total cash and investments at book value totaled $165,009,173. The net cash and investment at the end of the current month, at the end of August, was $161,336,392. It consisted of state LAIF deposits of $45.6 million. We still have our $2 million certificate of deposit at Montecito Bank and Trust. Federal agencies totaled $90.97 million, and corporate medium-term notes still at $12.25 million. We also have the $7.3 million airport promissory note, which is the 20-year note that Council authorized several months ago. And cash held at Santa Barbara Bank and Trust in the money market account totaled $3.2 million for the period. The average yield to maturity on the portfolio was 3.044%, which was up just slightly from last month. And the average days of maturity lengthened a bit because of the purchases during the period to 537 days. When you factor in the impact of that 20-year promissory note to the airport, the average days to maturity is 846. And with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Anyone have questions? Ms. Sarconi?
Thank you, Jill. But it's more of a bit of a report, if you'll indulge me for a second. It has to do with the investments and deposits that cities have with their various financial institutions. At the League of California Cities Board of Directors meeting last week, which is why I wasn't here last week, I was in San Jose, the League received a request, which some of you may know about and some of you may not, from former senator, state senator, and now LA City Council member Aracon, who is promoting the notion in the form of, I guess it's a bill, but it's in such rough form at this point that I don't quite know what form it's going to take. Anyway, he wanted support for the notion that the cities throughout the state divest their deposits with banking institutions that do not do enough to help folks who are about to be foreclosed on. In a nutshell, that's a crude way of explaining what it is he is proposing. Wonderful idea, a very noble cause, very morally correct, and putting pressure on banking institutions, which are not necessarily the most sympathetic of entities to either corporations, governments, or individuals, is all good. However, because the bill was in such a rough form, and there were so many things that were problematic about it at this point, the League took not only just a no position, they took an opposition position pretty unanimously at the board level, and suggested that he go back, thanked him for bringing it to us, and that he go back and rework it, that it hadn't even been passed in the city of Los Angeles yet, and so it might be good if, he got it passed in the city of Los Angeles before bringing it to the board of directors for the League, and that he's welcome to come back later on at a different date. One of the suggestions that was made was one of the ways that, the way this was worded at this moment in time was divest of all deposits, which is, as y'all well know, very difficult. Sometimes it would take a year. I think the city of San Francisco or San Jose said it would take them over a year to transform everything from one banking institution to several others and how you do it. The suggestion was made, actually, by the treasurer from San Jose, who's a new board member, to divest all investments, which would then take into consideration an entirely different kettle of fish of monies, which is why I bring it up under your life report, because that is not your deposits and doing business, that's your investments. And are you a little more nimble and quick to act and able to sort of go on the spur of the moment with that? So we suggested to him that maybe he look at that sort of a notion, that we supported what he was trying to do, but not in the form he brought it to us at this moment in time. So I don't know that I can answer any questions on it, but I'm happy to if you like.
Thank you. Any further questions on the investment report? Is there a motion?
We need a motion.
Oh, well,
I'll
I'll
move,
move it.
I'll move accepting the report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Mr. Samario, does that do it for today?
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.